In a land plagued by poverty, corruption, and the absence of a strong state, one man rose from the shadows to transform illegality into empire. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. Criminal, benefactor, terrorist, pop culture icon. He built one of the most violent and powerful drug empires in modern history. His life was a storm of contradictions, loved and feared, revered and reviled. This is not just the story of a man. It's the story of how cocaine, power, and terror reshaped a country and shook the world. Welcome to Veni, Vidi, Vici. Stories of things and people that changed humanity. Pablo Escobar was born on December 1st, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia, and grew up in Medellin. His father was a humble farmer, his mother a schoolteacher. But young Pablo had no interest in following their modest path. From an early age, he was obsessed with wealth and notoriety. In high school, he was already hustling, stealing gravestones, sanding off names and reselling them. He once said, "I would rather be in a grave in Colombia than a cell in the United States." A prophetic quote, rooted in his deep defiance of authority and fear of extradition. Fun fact, in his teenage years, Escobar told his friends he'd one day become president of Colombia, or a millionaire. They laughed. No one's laughing now. In the 1970s, Escobar entered the world of contraband smuggling. He trafficked everything from cigarettes to electronics, and eventually, marijuana. But then came cocaine, a game changer. At that time, cocaine was still relatively unknown in the US, but demand grew rapidly, especially among celebrities, Wall Street bankers, and youth culture. Escobar recognized it as white gold. It was compact, highly addictive, and produced profits almost unimaginable. For every kilo produced for $1,000 in Colombia, traffickers could make $60,000 or more in the United States. And Escobar didn't want to be just a middleman. He wanted control over everything, from the coca plantations to the streets of Miami. To build this empire, Escobar formed powerful alliances with other drug lords, like Carlos Lader, Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, El Mexicano, and the Ochoa brothers. Together, they created the Medellin cartel, which functioned like a transnational corporation. They had pilots, chemists, financiers, hitmen, money launderers, even politicians and military contacts. They built hidden airstrips in the jungle, submarines to cross oceans. Fun fact, Escobar once bought a Learjet just to transport his cash, not drugs, because they had so much money they didn't know where to store it. By the mid-1980s, the Medellin cartel controlled 80% of the global cocaine market. Escobar's personal wealth was estimated at $30 billion, making him the seventh richest man in the world, according to Forbes. But Escobar knew that money alone couldn't buy absolute power. He developed a brutal but effective strategy: plata o plomo, silver or lead. Accept the bribe or take a bullet. He paid off judges, prosecutors, police officers, generals, and murdered those who refused. At one point, he had over 1,000 sicarios, assassins, on his payroll. He ordered the assassination of a presidential candidate, journalists, Supreme Court justices, and countless police officers. Fun fact, Escobar once placed a bounty of $2,000 for every police officer killed in Medellin. The city became a war zone. Yet, in the poorest neighborhoods of Medellin, Escobar was viewed not as a villain, but as a hero. He built housing for the poor, funded soccer fields, provided free electricity, medicine, and food. He called it social investment. Others called it strategic manipulation. His neighborhood projects created a shield of loyalty. Entire communities protected him. Fun fact, the neighborhood Barrio Pablo Escobar, which he built for over 400 families, still exists, with murals of his face and graffiti that reads, "Gracias Pablo." In 1982, Escobar made a bold move. He entered politics. He was elected as an alternate congressman and rubbed shoulders with elites. But his past caught up with him. Journalists like Guillermo Cano, editor of El Espectador, publicly exposed his drug ties. Cano was later assassinated, a crime widely attributed to Escobar. Eventually, his political immunity was revoked. Humiliated and cornered, Escobar turned against the very system he tried to infiltrate. The Colombian government, under U.S. pressure, passed the extradition treaty. For Escobar, this was an unacceptable fate. He declared, "We prefer a grave in Colombia to a cell in the United States." From 1984 onward, he waged a war on the state. He ordered bombings in Bogotá, Medellin, and Cali. He blew up Avianca Flight 203, killing over 100 civilians, just to target one man. The country was plunged into chaos, a narco-terrorist insurgency with no precedent. In 1991, under intense national and international pressure, Escobar offered to surrender, on one condition: he would build his own prison. The government agreed. The result was La Catedral, a private fortress with a jacuzzi, a bar, a soccer field, and panoramic views. He continued to run his cartel from inside, even ordering murders from his luxury cell. Fun fact: La Catedral had no guards, only men handpicked by Escobar. It was less a prison, more a hideout with amenities. After multiple scandals, the government finally tried to move him. In July 1992, Escobar escaped through a back wall and vanished again. From 1992 to 1993, Escobar became a fugitive. But this time, he was truly alone. His allies were dead or arrested. The Cali cartel, his former rivals, now worked with authorities. Even his family tried to flee Colombia. The Colombian government, aided by the search bloc and U.S. intelligence, launched an all-out manhunt. With surveillance tech, wiretaps, and informants, they closed in. On December 2, 1993, Escobar made a phone call to his son, a fatal mistake. Authorities traced the call to a house in Medellin. Search blocks stormed the area. Escobar fled to the rooftops, armed but cornered. A brief gunfight followed. Escobar was shot and killed. The exact shooter is unknown. Some say Colombian forces, others claim he took his own life. Either way, the king of cocaine was dead. Pablo Escobar's death marked the end of the Medellin cartel, but it didn't end the drug trade. It merely shifted power to new players, like the Cali cartel, and later, Mexican cartels like Sinaloa. Colombia still bears his scars. Entire generations lost, institutions corrupted, and thousands dead. But his image persists. From Netflix dramas to t-shirts, from neighborhood murals to drug lord folklore, Escobar lives on as a myth. Pablo Escobar was a monster to many, a saint to some, and a symbol of something far greater than crime. He was the product of a broken society, where poverty, corruption, and inequality opened the door for a man like him to rise. His story isn't just about cocaine. It's about power, fear, and what happens when lawlessness meets ambition. If this journey into history's darkest corners captivated you, leave a comment, subscribe, and share. We'll be back with more tales that shaped our world. On Veni, Vidi, Vici, stories of things and people that changed humanity.